All right. Yeah, will you let me know when you see my screen?
Will do.
Okay, and I just typed in the chat window too. Everyone, please forgive us a little bit if the VR comes across as choppy. I think we've seen other webinars with VR where, you know, you can get a sense of what it's like to be in the VR experience, but, you know, that kind of frame rate over GoToMeeting isn't really as smooth as it is in person. So please forgive us. And also, if my machine just decides to stop working all of a sudden, Tom's got a backup machine ready to show it. That could happen. Hopefully it won't, though.
Yeah, not to mention the immersive part is also very difficult to simulate over GoToWebinar, but we'll do our best.
Yeah, exactly. The technology will get there, I'm sure, and we can all experience VR simultaneously. But that's not what we're demoing today. Excellent. Okay, so this is what we're going to be covering. Thanks, everybody, for attending. I hope you enjoy it. Last month on our FormIt Friday, we showed this series of slides. The latest FormIt release, FormIt version 16 or spring release, available on our website, shows a model that our friends at Studio Architecture built. This is a FormIt model. They went to town with materials and setting up this entry canopy and the entry sequence. And in our latest software that works with Revit 2018, you're able to import this model and get the materials to come in with it. And that is, it obviously looks beautiful. It really sets a high bar for the visual fidelity, going from concept design to design development. And it also enables a lot of neat things to do. So your geometry all comes over, that part's great. And then you can start setting up conceptual stage elevation views, you know, throw these into a schematic design package very easily. And you can also then connect with whatever plugins and services are in the Revit ecosystem, one of those being Autodesk Live and the Revit Live service. So that's kind of where we're going to delve into today. And I just want to show you the studio model in the various locations and talk a little bit about the process. And then we'll go into more depth about how to do that, what are some of the tips and techniques along the way, so that you can do this at home yourself by following along with the webinar or just taking screenshots of the steps and that sort of thing. So first off, you'll start in the FormIt model. You'll import FormIt to Revit, and then from Revit, it's just a single click to send it to Live, and your Live file will be created for you in the cloud, and you will open it in a Live editor. And then from there, you'll enter a VR mode where you'll get to look cool and awesome, just like this person in the background slide. So I'll go ahead and jump into those different softwares and show you this. This is the studio model in FormIt, and I can orbit around and show you the work that they did setting this up. It's pretty cool that they set up some scenes, set up the materials, took the time to model this all out, and really what they're doing is, you know, what people use FormIt and tools like SketchUp for is quick push-pull modeling. And the great thing about what we're doing with FormIt is that it doesn't end there. You're basically able to take this model and import it to Revit. So I'm running Revit 2018. I go to the Add-ins tab, and I've got the latest version of the FormIt converter downloaded onto my machine and running here in Revit. So there's a button in the converter to import FormIt to Revit. I went ahead and clicked that button, and it processed and imported all of this geometry. So a lot of this is mass geometry. They've left the category as mass. You can choose other categories, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But all this geometry came in as mass. And when I click to realistic view, you can see that the materials are still applied. So I'll zoom in a bit here and show you this entry sequence and orbit around. You can see even the people were imported, things like that. So very high fidelity import. And at this point, you can set up some views and some scenes, kind of like what I was showing, your elevation view. You can set up a view template for this and apply it to all your elevation views. And you can also set up a few camera perspective views. And this comes in handy because when you're in a 3D view, you can go to the View tab and click the Go Live button. and that will kick off the process where you choose the detail level and you can choose the path to where you want to save your file eventually. But you basically click Save and Go, and that's it. That's the one-click workflow, and it'll sort of process your file for you and give that file back to you. And at that point, you can jump into the live editor. And this is a neat environment on its own right. You can use your arrow keys to kind of look around and walk around in this environment. And you can also go to your scenes that you had set up ahead of time. So those Revit views that you had just created, those are translated over into viewpoints. And that's really handy when we jump into VR here in a moment. Just another couple of examples of what you can do in the live environment. This is where you can control the time of day and kind of articulate your shadows. You can also do some neat stuff with the info button by selecting your elements that are in here and get some information about them, their properties, like you were seeing in Revit. And you can also do artificial lights, change your height, travel speed, things of that nature. And you can even go into kind of a cool monotone mode if that's what you're going for. For the VR experience, I think we'll leave the textures showing, and I'll get the GoToMeeting bar out of my way and close the field of view button. And then there's a little icon down here in the corner for VR. So I'll go ahead and turn on my VR controllers, click the VR button, and it will jump into VR. So everybody at home doesn't get to see me put on this headset, look a little dorky, but I'm doing that, and I'll start to walk around the model just a little bit. Hopefully you guys can all see this, that I'm rotating my head so I can see the model from different perspectives, and I've got my controllers in front of me, and I can essentially teleport around the model to get a view of this entry canopy with the people, with the materials, with the geometry, and I'm actually a part of this model underneath the canopy, what that feel is going to be. And getting to walk around in your design while it's still digital obviously is a huge benefit, especially if you can get your clients to come and put it on also and start to give you some approvals, thumbs up and thumbs down, things they like and things they don't, with different options. So I'll click this viewpoint, and what it will do is warp me back to that saved viewpoint where we were, and I can do the same to that slightly closer viewpoint as soon as it registers. There we go. All right, and so this is my saved viewpoint over here. So in just a few clicks and a few minutes there, I was able to show you how you can get from FormIt into Revit, into Live, and then into VR. And that's what we're going to delve into a bit more over the rest of the time today.
So
any questions?
Yeah, a couple questions came in. So one was, does the Live program place you in the correct geographical location? And the answer is yes, that the environment, the sun light map environment is taken from Revit, which is also taken from FormIt. So your shadow, like Live does not have a notion of location necessarily at this point, but it does take the light mapping properly from Revit. The other question was, why do I have to send it to FormIt via Revit? Can't I just send it directly from FormIt to Live? And that's a great point. Not yet, but Live is still a new, very new service, and we are starting to look at some options for that. But right now, the workflow is relegated to directly through Revit. And that's the questions for now.
Great. All right, so we'll go into some of the step-by-step. I'll use the old teaching technique, talk about what you're going to show, and then walk through it and talk about it again, just so everybody has context. We'll start off in FormIt, and we'll talk a little bit about how to apply materials, just a quick tutorial there, and then talk about the importance of placing Entourage furniture, both from RFA and from SketchUp. Then how to specify the category, especially around Entourage, because we're going to talk about trees. And then the importance of saving your file with the desired layers visible. this acronym WYSIWYG, if you're not familiar with it, what you see is what you get. That is pretty important, both in FormIt going to Revit and then Revit going to live, because the only things that are visible are what are going to get exported and imported. And then we'll talk about the trick. You want to save your FormIt file and your Revit file in a desired location, not really in a temporary location, because the texture files for your materials need to be pathed correctly. And finally, if your file is big, as a lot of files are, there's a neat technique to kind of break it down more granular, sort of layer by layer, and export between Revit and FormIt that way. So let me jump into FormIt and talk about these steps before we go into Revit and talk about those steps. So in the Revit environment, we've got probably 3 important ways to create and work with materials. And the first one is just to create your own material, which is as simple as clicking this little plus button, specifying a color, browsing for a texture map that you might have locally, and then adjusting the scale, the transparency, the reflection, gloss, and other parameters. And that's probably the easiest way, but you only can do that so many times before you start looking for faster ways to get going with materials. So we've included a way to browse the Autodesk material library. These are the same materials that appear in Revit when you start up a Revit file and start from a blank template. So we start off with the hardwood and a cherry material, but we have all of the different materials that are included in Revit, like these fancy stones, and the masonry is also a kind of a neat category to browse through, these modular grays and bricks. And you can just import this material and it shows up in your list. The last way that we talked about on a previous FormIt Friday is to make your own material seed file and store it in your content library. So I'm just going to click this, drag it into my model, and all of these different materials that I've used on previous projects come in. They now populate the material list, and I can select and delete that seed object, but I still have all of my materials. So those are 3 important, fast ways to get started with materials. Now I'll just talk about how to apply these materials. Again, there's pretty much 3 methods. One is single-clicking on a face. First, single-clicking on the tile to load your paintbrush, and then single-clicking on a face to paint just that face. You can also single-click on a different material and then double-click on an object, and it will paint all of the faces at once. That's a handy shortcut. The other case, these are groups, so I can go into the group and adjust it, turn off the hide so you can see that this other group is adjusting at the same time. A really fast way to apply materials and work with materials is to paint on a group. And this is a little bit foreign to Revit users, but it is familiar probably to SketchUp users. And if I single-click my material tile, then I can single-click on a group. And this group is basically painted with that material, and I can now paint another group on the instance level with a different material. So it's kind of handy. It's a fast way to go. If I wanted to have the same material on both of these groups, of course I could edit the group and then double-click to paint all of the faces at once, and then they all update. But if I wanted to have a special way of keeping them the same geometry but different materials, you can paint on the group instance. So that's kind of a neat trick. Wanted to make sure I shared that with you. All right, so next I want to talk about Entourage and making your scene look beautiful by putting Entourage into it. And I'm going to switch over to this other file for this example. This is a model I've been building up over time, so sorry if you've seen it before, but it does have a lot of neat furniture elements, tree elements, and even people elements. So Entourage definitely brings your renderings to life, and placing them is quite simple when you're using the content library. We've got a library that we shared with the world, so we'll make sure that we include a link to it in our blog post with this video. but the furniture families that we've used over time are in here, and that includes this patio chair, which you can click and then drag out into your model. And I'll go ahead and hit escape. You can see I've already placed a couple here, and we've also got a couch file that I've placed in here. And then I want to show these trees as well. And we've got a bunch of trees here in the content library. You can just click, drag them out, and then place it into the scene. And these trees are imported from SketchUp directly. They just convert over to a FormIt file. The textures stay in place. Even the hierarchy of the group stay as they were in SketchUp. The only thing you want to do once you've imported them is select it, double-click it, and go into group edit mode. Go to your properties panel, and you can rename the tree and also set the category of the object of the group. So in this case, I want to set it to Entourage. It's important that that's not set to mass. And by default, all of the groups are set to mass. So that does make one step that you need to do to make sure you categorize that as Entourage. The naming is optional, but it's probably good practice to name your objects. I'll zoom in on this furniture scene. I've got this group as a little vignette, so I can jump into this group and jump into this chair, and I can see that it's categorized as furniture. It's a little patio chair. It's got geometry and textures imported from SketchUp. I'll click to jump out of it. I've got this couch, similar story, boxy leather couch, categorized as furniture, and then this concrete bench table. This one is left as mass, and that's probably fine for now, but that's the step you want to do to make sure that you categorize things correctly. As people are familiar with Revit, you know that once you're a mass family, you cannot be swapped out to another category. Masses are kind of locked in as masses. So setting to generic or Entourage is important. The last piece I want to hit on here is that these chairs inside are converted from RFA families. There's a workflow in FormIt where you can take existing RFAs, bring them into FormIt for use, and then we can swap them back out for their original RFAs. And I'll show that in just a moment. So the last piece I want to hit on is categories, or I'm sorry, layers. So I'll zoom out a bit, and actually I'll go to a different scene called Working View, where I have some of these other model units out and about, away from my model. And it's important that when I save this file for importing to Revit, that I don't want these to be visible. So I've got a scene I've set up ahead of time called Revit Interop scene. I can go there, and I only have this stuff visible that I want visible. Go to the Layers panel, and you can see I've got several of my layers turned off, and that's because I don't want that geometry to come into Revit. So that's kind of a time saver because it's not going to import a bunch of geometry that you don't want. And it's also important for like design options. If you have different design options for windowsills, that you specify the design option you want and have that visible. I'm going to jump over to Revit now and show you this file as it imported to Revit. There we go. So this is my condo file, and as you can see, I just imported the model, not any of the model units off to the side. You can see the trees look a little funky, and you can see that these furniture elements came in from SketchUp with the textures intact. So that is pretty handy. Anybody who's got a SketchUp model or a SketchUp library that they've got and they want to reuse in FormIt and on into Revit, this is a great way to incorporate it. I've also taken the families that came from Revit and converted them back into RVT elements. And this is a very simple workflow. I'll go to the Add-ins tab. I have the FormIt converter here at the top, and I'll click the Reload Families button. That terminology may be a little confusing, but basically what it does is it swaps out the FormIt version of this file, the one that didn't have textures and was just categorized as furniture. It didn't have any other parameters associated with it. And I can swap it out for the original Revit family that I've got stored on my computer. All I have to do is paste in the path that goes to that family or that folder full of families, and it will swap them out automatically, put them in the right place, and now they're if I click it, you can see it's the brewer chair, furniture category, and all the other importance parameters associated with it have been restored. So that's a big time-saving, high-fidelity workflow between FormIt and Revit. I'm going to touch on the trees now because that's a pretty important aspect, especially with the live workflow, because live does a really neat trick that if you have RPC trees in your Revit file, it'll swap those out for even higher fidelity trees in the live editor. And these will look silly if you import them to the live editor. So I'll talk about the workflow for changing these out. If I select it, you can see in the type drop-down, the type selector over here, it's the FormIt group tree and its category Entourage. I cannot swap this out for an RPC tree because they are of the category planting, which is different than Entourage. So a little irritating, but it's an easy fix. I can double-click to enter the family editor. I can click this folder icon up in the corner for family categories and parameters. You can see Entourage, it's what's currently set, and I can scroll down to the planting category and click OK. And that's the only change I made, just a minor data change. And I can click Load into Project, make sure it's set to the right project, and then overwrite the existing version. And now I do the old click, right-click, select all instances in the entire project. And now the planting category is how they're set. And I can choose from the RPC trees that are here. So I'll scroll down. I believe this Shumard oak is a good equivalent. I think that's what I went for. And now they are fancy RPC trees. And they'll go into live with that kind of high fidelity look that I'm going for. So yeah, that's the workflow for getting trees to work. Now, the creating perspectives and working with perspectives in Revit is not difficult. People have probably done this lots, but it never hurts to cover it one more time. Underneath your 3D icon at the top, there's a little drop down. You can choose the camera button. Clear that. And you click where you want to place your camera, and then you point it at a certain direction. And when you go to this view, it's a little disorienting because you see some things, but not everything. And that is because mask category is typically turned off in new perspective views, at least with the default Revit templates. So your firm's template may already have this set up, but if not, then you need to go into the VG dialog, find the mask category, and then check that on, and you'll see all the geometry. You might also want to make the crop view size a little bit bigger. By default, it's rather small, 6 inches by 4.5 inches. Just change that to 12 by 6, and then click OK, and then do a zoom extent. And now you get to sort of crop and orient your camera view. And this is one case where the steering wheel is quite handy. I'll just click that once, choose the Look button, and now I can kind of point the camera where I want it to be, get a neat perspective set up. And then you can also pan here as well, a couple of other things. But the important thing to do is click this little button in the lower right and click Save View. And that'll record those changes you just made with the steering wheel to the actual view so that the next time you open it, it will be the same perspective and same orientation. All right, so we've set this up. It's probably a good idea to look at this in realistic view just to get a sense for the materials. One thing that I've noticed is that the transparency of glass in FormIt and the reflectivity in the gloss, you might have pumped those up quite a bit to get an effect in FormIt, and they may be disorienting in rendered views once you get to Revit. So I just want to show this quickly, that if I go to the Manage tab, go to the Materials library, I'll wait for a moment for that to load, and then if I search for FormIt, we add a FormIt prefix on any materials that are imported into Revit. So it makes it easy to find something that you're looking for, like glass. I'll go ahead and, there we go. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I think that's what I wanted to do. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Anyway, you can review the material parameters for this and make sure that the glass is as opaque as you want it to be and as glossy as you want it to be. And you could also swap out that material there where I was too if you wanted to use a Revit material that you're familiar with too. Okay, so I've got the category visibility that I have desired here with mass. I do want to make sure that other categories are turned off in case I'm going to be going over to live. So it's the WYSIWYG editor again, that if you have a bunch of stuff that you don't want live to process for you and you don't want to have visible in your rendering, you need to turn them off before you go to live. So go ahead and hit cancel because this is just FormIt geometry. I do want all of this to come over. And I'll go to the View tab again, and the Go Live button is there. So I think I mentioned this, but I want to reinforce it. You do need to be in a 3D view when you send your file to live. It's not going to work if you're in a plan view or an elevation view. So I can show you that real quick here with my south elevation. I've kind of set this up. It looks pretty cool. But if I hit go live, it's going to give me a red X here. Oh, active view not valid. And that might cause you some consternation, but it's pretty trivial to fix. While I'm here, I'll show you the graphic display options dialog for setting up a view like this. People may be familiar with this dialog, others may not be. You have the ability to swap out your visual style here, as well as set shadows and ambient shadows on, as well as this new tool for depth queuing, which gives it this awesome kind of faded effect in the background. I usually dial that one down a little bit and that one up a little bit, and then I'm happy with the result. And if you want to know what these parameters mean, you can just hover your mouse there for a minute, and there's a nice tooltip that explains it. The other one is this lighting box. This one I love because you can dial down the shadows contrast, so it's a little bit lighter, dial up the ambient light if your scene's too dark, and you can increase the sun too to kind of achieve the same effect. So both of those, I really suggest people get in here and start playing with that.
Yeah, forget VR. I like these elevation views. Maybe I'm just old school that way. I don't know.
Totally. Me too. I'm such a sucker for this depth queuing. I can't even begin to tell you. I love it.
Yeah, it looks great.
And Tom, the levels over here imported from FormIt too. That's important to point out. We set these level heights in FormIt. They come over to Revit, and as you can see, they're slicing my mass, so I can create mass floors from those levels that come across. That's pretty handy. All right. I think that's all to share here in Revit. I guess the last thing I'll point out, I've got my folder here with the files that I'm working with. This is my Courtyard FormIt file, and this is my Courtyard RVT. And what I want to point out is that next, in the same folder, when I imported from FormIt, a Courtyard FormIt folder was created, and inside this, you'll see all of the texture maps and bump maps that are necessary for the file to show the textures. And this is a Revit requirement. Revit does memory management such that actual textures are not stored in the Revit file. They're mapped to on disk. So your Autodesk material library is full of textures, and that's where it pulls the textures from. They're not saved in your actual RVT. So I point that out because when you do the import FormIt to Revit, you want to have that file in the place where it's going to live. Because if you move the RVT without moving that associated folder full of textures, you'll lose the textures when you reopen it. And obviously that would be a bummer. You'd open it up and it wouldn't look the way that you wanted it to look. So that's just a little bit of pre-thought. Think about it before you import and you should be fine. All right, now let's jump over to the live editor because there's some neat tricks here too that I want to make sure to point out. I'll come up to their file menu and click Close Scene. You can only have one open at a time. And I'll grab my courtyard file that I've created. And it takes just a moment to open this. And the live editor on its own is a pretty sweet environment. Highly rendered. This is what I'm talking about with the trees, where they swapped out the RPC trees and replaced them with these live trees. I don't know what kind of file type they are, but they're beautiful. And they have a really neat sort of animated effect on the ground plane. So we'll take a look at that in just a moment, but that's why it's worth it to do that extra step there with the trees. The textures all come across. As I was pointing out with the sun, you can adjust your shadows and make that the angle that you want. One thing to point out is you want to set this before you go into VR, because once you're in VR, you don't have a way to adjust this. And I think you'd have to leave the VR environment, adjust it, and then go back into VR, so it's not a huge deal, but make sure you get the sun angle you're interested in before you go in. I mentioned this before with the info button, but this is totally cool. You click info and then you can start to click some of the objects in the model to get their information. This is the furniture piece that I had imported before. This is a mass railing that I've imported. This is a generic model that I've imported. So this stuff from FormIt might not be as interesting, but if you have a fully detailed BIM, it might be really handy to be able to talk about the objects that you're actually looking at in this highly rendered environment. The next piece here again is the views. These came over from Revit. I took the time to set up this south elevation, this side of the building, orbit around to this side, and this front of the building. I don't know if this is coming across on the go-to, but there's a little kind of subtle tweak of the shadow there from the trees moving.
Yeah, you can kind of see it. One question came was, can you see it within the site? And I believe if you go back to Revit, I think there's an option when you click Go Live to say Extend to Horizon. And let's see if you, oh, you had that on. Maybe just you don't have any physical geometry on the site. Yeah, so if you have a site there, I just think this model just doesn't happen to have a site pad. Is that correct?
Yeah, it does not. That might, I wonder if it's pulling from the topography category or if it just needs something there geometrically. But yeah, there's not something there in this model.
Yeah, Roxanne, who's on the live team, just commented that you need to have a topography category there.
Okay, cool. And so I have these scenes over on the side that I've set up ahead of time in Revit and then imported, but there's nothing stopping me from going ahead and setting new scenes from within Live. So I'll click the tap and go button and then navigate inside the building. There are physics set up with the geometry, so I'm not going through walls, which would be disorienting. Live navigates you around geometry to go into specific areas. And then I'll use the arrow controls to change my perspective and look up here with the mouse. So I want to set up a view here with my, before I go into the VR environment. And that's pretty easy. Now I just click this little plus button and I can set up a new point of view, and I can even, you know, click in there and rename this if that's what I want to do too. So I get the courtyard. Yeah, so you can set up views in Revit, but you don't actually have to. You can come into Live and set those up. And it makes for a really nice storytelling experience that you can just click and it'll navigate you over to it. You can also see the materials and the Revit families that I imported. This would be a much better experience clicking info and then clicking that couch. Now you can see furniture, what level it's on, different constraints, as well as the materials associated with it. So pretty sweet. Let's see if there's any other tricks here I want to make sure to show you. Tom and I did talk about, or look at this guy real quick. There's a publish to iPad button. There's a viewer for your iPad, so you can have the similar walkthrough experience, not the VR experience, but similar walkthrough of the live editor experience from the iPad, which is pretty neat. I haven't tested that out, so I can't speak to any techniques there, but there is a button to do that. And also, we've got some links to share with you about taking this live model now and opening that in Stingray to embellish and make some much more interesting and elaborate workflows and even material editing and things like that. So neither Tom or I are experts in that arena, so we're just going to put some breadcrumbs out there for you to experience and do some research on if you're interested. But now I want to jump into the VR experience of this model and walk around it. So the experience here is the same. Go ahead and turn on my Vive controllers. And just, yeah, we're using the HTC Vive, but I believe Live also works with Oculus. I can't speak to a better experience one way or the other, except that I'm now familiar with the Vive and I really love it. Tom, have you tried an Oculus, especially with Revit Live?
No, I have not. We have 2 Vive setups in Boston, so have not tried Oculus for this yet.
Okay, cool. So yes, now I've walked into the wall. Here we are inside my apartment, and I'll go ahead and do the teleporting to start navigating around the inside. So it's great that I get a sense for what the apartment is going to be like well before it's actually built, and what this front porch here would be like also. Let me jump outside here into the courtyard. And here's these furniture elements that we imported from SketchUp and placed here, and the trees. You can see this Entourage really really sells the experience of being here. Let me also jump out here to my viewpoints that I've saved ahead of time, and you can see the people that are part of the scene too really help to tell the story of scale, moving around, what's outdoor, and what the experience of the space might be like. So I'll go ahead and navigate over here to go inside, and it looks like my height is a little off. Let me jump out and see if that's something that I adjusted in.
Yeah, so there are height settings. You can even set it to be like a toddler. So if you go to yeah, settings, yeah, there you are. Now you're on average, 96th percentile.
You know, the other thing that I might have done with this model, let me jump into VR and I'll show you. There's a neat mode where you can go to the mini map. And from here, you can start to adjust your model. So this is kind of a model sitting on a table environment. And can you see the controls, the UI that's visible on the controls?
Yeah, we see your controllers and their little tooltips.
Okay, great. So yeah, these manipulate controls allow you to pick up the model and move it. And I wonder if that's what I did, is actually picking this guy up and scaling it a little bit. Might have adjusted that. I'm not sure if there's a reset button, but anyway, that could be handy here. So to get out of the mini map and get back into your model is you just teleport back down into it.
Yeah, there was a comment that the scene's very choppy, and that's just GoToWebinar. It's actually really smooth when you're doing this, and definitely encourage you all to try this out on your own machines. There was a couple questions. So one question was, I understand how to send to go to live, but did you discuss how to launch and get into the editor? So you might want to, the other thing,
sure.
It might be good to go back to that and then also talk about the difference between the editor and the viewer and the publish. So you showed the publish to iPad, but also the publish to live or publish to Windows option, because that's a way that you could give it to somebody as a standalone. They could download the viewer and then view it on their own machine.
Yes, great point. I'll jump out of here in one more minute. I want to point this out before I leave, though. People have described the vertigo effect of, missing a railing and being afraid to take the step off the side, and that was exactly how I felt right here, where I built this model and I wanted to leave it without a railing for dramatic effect, but now I feel like that's a dangerous decision to make. So I'll probably need to add that into the model next time I've got it open. But yeah, okay, so let me jump out of here and we can talk about that a little more. Tom, is that just the button to send to Windows? And the viewer is free, right?
Yes. So when you publish from Revit, the user interface gives you kind of an automatic open link, which will open the editor. But if you need to open them later, the default location for the files is your documents folder. So Tobias, if you open your documents, you should see a Revit Live folder in there.
Yeah.
And then the editor files are these LVMD files. So that opens in the editor. And then when you publish to Windows, you'll get a .live file, and that you could send to somebody. They can download the viewer from the Autodesk website for free and then view it on their Windows machine. And there was a question about, performance, and I believe it scales down depending on the hardware. So it's I'm sure there's a minimum requirement for the viewing experience, but it based on this Stingray game engine, it'll scale down to other people's hardware. You don't need like a full VR rig just to do the walkthrough part. A couple other questions. So, is there a seasonal change like I think Lumion has? And I don't believe they have that option yet to do kind of like fall, winter. And then there was, do Revit walkthroughs carry over? And I don't believe they do, but that would be kind of a neat feature if you had set up a Revit walkthrough. But I don't believe they do. And then changes made in Revit real time, do they come over? And I don't believe that's the case. But you'd make a change and then you would just republish the live.
Yeah, and I was impressed, just to give people a sense of scale, when I was working with this model, publishing to live and getting it downloaded back to my machine was less than 5 minutes. Like, it felt like 2 or 3 minutes. And the size of the file that I got back, I don't know if you guys noticed this, was only 45 megs. So it's not a huge file, pretty scalable.
Yeah, that's pretty lightweight. And there was a question about the model size limit for live. Maybe some of the team members are kind of listening in, and maybe they can answer that one. I remember hearing a limit. I think it was somewhere around 200 megabytes or something, or 250, but don't quote me on that. The questions are great, and what I'll do is I'm going to pass these off to the live team as well. So one of the questions was, how would you handle design options from Revit? So I don't believe those carry over, but keep in mind this is a new feature, a new service, and the team's been really active in getting feedback from Revit users, and I'm sure this is in their backlog to sort of enhance the set of features you can get out of Revit and into live. So it's a pretty exciting area, and there's a lot of activity there. I can tell you definitely. Just if their Slack channels any indication. So a couple more questions. Can Revit Live be viewed by more than one 3D viewer or headset? So like I believe it's like a multi-user case, and I don't believe we have that set up just yet. Although that would be pretty sweet too, to kind of tie that into FormIt collaboration somehow. One other thing that's worth pointing out, I mean, you showed the SketchUp kind of Entourage and furniture workflow, but if you did have a medium-sized SketchUp model, that is a pretty viable workflow to be able to get into live is via FormIt. So you could do kind of SketchUp with full materials into FormIt and then into Revit. I mean, I believe you could probably do that with 3ds Max, and there's other ways of doing it, but this would be a pretty nice way to get your SketchUp model into live, and then you would get a Revit file added in the mix as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we focused on the trees and the furniture because the SketchUp warehouse is full of trees and furniture, and you don't even need to own SketchUp to be able to access that content for the Entourage and really make the scene come alive. But if you have existing SketchUp models, FormIt is awesome at importing them. The materials come in, the layers come in, and the groups and group structure come in, as well as the scenes even come in. So, you've got you get a very high fidelity import. And like Tom was saying, if you've got a model that's, I guess we've seen some huge ones, like 350 meg SketchUp files that probably don't perform that great in FormIt. But 50 megs, regular size designs, those come in great and can be migrated on into Revit and VR.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple other questions. So will you be able to use live with Revit models from C4R? I believe so. I mean, I think if you, as long as you, it's probably going to operate off of your local file. But as long as you have like a local version and then you run live from there, you'll be able to use it. And then we got a comment this from Dave Lawrence. I think he's on the Stingray team. Said multi-users being developed for Stingray but not released yet. So, and I see you have that AU class up, and I just wanted to point out that so live is based off of our Stingray gaming engine, and there's a whole workflow where you can actually unpack the live file into Stingray, which is a whole separate application for gaming engines. If you ever used Unity or Unreal, it's a very similar style. And this would allow you to add your own animations, your own materials, your own sort of scene transitions, and there's a whole host of things you could do. That's kind of so this AU class, which we'll link to in the blog post, goes into that workflow. There's also a Autodesk Knowledge Network article on this as well. So if you're feeling brave, it's worth going into. So yeah, so I have this scene set up. I'm in the editor, and I've added these two sconces in Revit. So artificial lighting objects. The short answer is yes, they will provide artificial light, and the setting by default is to turn them on when it's nighttime, which is kind of cool, kind of clever, right? So if I go into 8:30 p.m., you'll see those lights actually turn on. You can actually change that, I believe, in the settings under lights, and I can just say artificial lights are on all the time, and then switch that over to, yeah, so now the artificial lights will go on. This is a really simple example. Obviously, it's worth trying out in your own models. And then if I kind of go over to VR, oh, I'm not on the VR machine, so yeah. So anyway, but these building model steps into the VR as well. There's the requirements document, system requirements document does warn against hundreds and hundreds of artificial lights. I think that can slow the VR down a little bit, but it's definitely worth checking out. Yeah, so that was pretty much it. All I wanted to show on my side. And then
that's awesome to see the artificial lights. It looks really nice. We had a question just about the demo models, and yeah, we'll be happy to share the examples that we walked through, so you guys can try them out and test with them yourselves.
Yeah. I guess one last thing I just wanted to point out is that you do have this present button, so this is really handy when you're in the editor. If you basically want to simulate what it will look like for the live, the viewer only, if you press present, you'll go into presentation mode, and then you've got, you're kind of simulating what the viewer would look like, so that's handy. Cool. Well, we filled up an hour. We thought we might not be able to, but there's definitely a lot to talk about and a lot of interest in VR, which is great. We're somewhat new to it ourselves. When we started doing this Revit materials feature, Josh Goldstein, who isn't here today with us, said, hey, we should just try to send that into live, and we did, and we were like all blown away by the results. So it's been really fun to explore the VR possibilities. It's been a lot of I've gotten a lot of comments about editing in VR, which I can say we are looking into, and more on that as things develop. But I think that's kind of the two big frontiers I think are going to be editing in VR as well as AR, and overlaying these models over reality and site, kind of overlaying this model onto the actual site. So yeah, it's good. It's really, really exciting area. So thank you everybody for joining us today. The blog post and the recording, if you go to formit.autodesk.com, we'll have that up probably by Monday. And there'll be an email that goes out from the GoToWebinar telling you when that's ready. And one last question, yeah, because this is probably worth clarifying: is Revit Live equal Autodesk Live, or is there another live plugin for Navisworks or InfraWorks? I don't believe there is. They renamed it recently Revit Live to be very clear that this service that we were kind of working with today is specifically tied to a Revit workflow. It kind of uses Revit in the cloud to generate the models. There may be developments, but I don't know in terms of plugging live into other applications like Navisworks. But we'll have to report back on that as we find out more. Cool. Any closing thoughts, Tobias?
Oh no, I'm glad that came off as well as it did. You never know with VR.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And your machine kept going, so that's good. That's good. Yeah. Didn't fail.
The fingers crossing and wood knocking ended up paying off.
All right. Well, everybody have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend, and we'll catch up with you guys next time.
Thanks, Tom.
Yep. Bye. Thank you. Bye.